Hi, everybody. I wish I could say it was nice to see you, but I can't see you. I hope everyone is doing reasonably well. And I have a couple of questions that have come in. And one is from Jennifer Butler, who's with the New Jersey group. I think she's in Maryland. And she says, can you talk about the meaning of surrender in religious systems, its role in spiritual development, and how it may relate to experiencing a movement of energy? Interesting question, especially in relationship to how we are in the West and more in the East as well, mainly because of our primary interest in how we think things need to be to make us personally of value. This question comes out of a very ancient concept, both in the East, Middle East, and in the West. When many of the religious backgrounds were involved with moving into caves and attempting to allow themselves to move towards an integration with the divine. From my perspective, this is fascinating because it is thought by some that is an ultimate state. And I would think that there's a movement, some movements towards it, but mostly movements away from it. And that really is based on the idea of individuals, even in the concepts of spirituality, lean heavily on the idea of competition between many folks for who's more able than some other folks. This is a dilemma, actually, in our world, but our world has gone in this direction quite a bit. And if you can understand where I'm leading this, then you can understand how difficult it is to allow ourselves to engage with higher states if our focus is on ourselves, primarily. In the old traditions and in some of the newer ones, this concept of surrendering was basically letting yourself link up with a higher state, and being involved with that higher state allowed that higher state to guide you and engage with you in this world. This is really frowned upon by certainly scientific backgrounds or philosophical backgrounds as they sit today, and many psychological backgrounds as well, because it puts you in a position of a different state of awareness, which is looked upon as not the norm. And our definitions of how a person is based on how the world is seen in the view of what is normal and reasonably normal as an individual might live their life. In the old traditions, I keep saying old traditions, I apologize for that, in some religious traditions, there is still a willingness to allow yourself to focus primarily on prayer and meditation, uh, to try and remove yourself in a way from this particular razzle dazzle world, uh, uh, so that you can begin to link up relative to a belief or relative to awareness involved with a higher state. Of course, this can actually happen. The difficulty is surviving in that world. In countries like India, for example, and a few other countries that are community oriented rather than individually oriented, there is still the possibility of survival through coming out on the streets and begging because you are considered to be a spiritual being. That is one rendering. The other rendering, of course, is living in a cave and staying there, still away from community, uh, but at the same time considered by the community as being in a position of reverence, so that therefore food would be placed in front of the cave or water would be placed in front of the cave, and you would survive. In the West, not so much. It's a dilemma in a kind of a way because the concept of surrender is akin to getting to the point where you can actually allow yourself to consider the possibility that you could be linked to a higher state. And then from there on, do the will of the higher state. This is very difficult for us in the West. It ends up being doing the will of a belief that is related directly to an idea that your religion is better than anybody else's, possibly, or your religion is opens up enough to folks who are willing to engage with that level of union. And most often that is considered kind of reverential with respect to priests or ministers, and they're just human beings like all the rest of us. And that is not a negative thing. That's just how it's set up. So, in this particular thing, though, when you're dealing with letting go, you can do this on your own. You don't have to have a label. You can engage with the world, be in the world, and at the same time, be willing to allow yourself to engage with those states. And in our premise, we talk about engaging with energy at various levels of awareness and various levels of how you would behave in life. Behavior is just one of those things, like if you meet a person on the road and they're a human being, they will have behaviors that are constructive and some that aren't. Same is true of everybody who lives. That's a fact. However, you can try to attempt to act like it's not true, but nonetheless it is true. And that's the way life is for all of us. In the older traditions, the sages that used to be were allowed to be in a position of engagement or opening up to a perception or relationship or interconnectedness with a divine state. In reality, everyone is connected to a divine state. In our world, divine is probably not the word that you should use because there's all kinds of reflections and inflections that relate to describing it. But if you used life force at these levels, this life force can be perceived literally as a flow of energy. And in many traditions in the East, that flow is considered to be, if you can perceive it, you are somehow valuable in the world. And I would consider that to be basically true from my perspective. You have to think about this for yourself. But at the same time, perceiving energy is not the end point because you can have energy flowing through you that appears to be tremendously powerful, and you still act out like a normal human being. Your version, of course, and in fact, with no totally sincere interest in changing it because it gets you anything and everything that you want. This would be normal in our world because we exercise that right in the Western world. And in the East, to some degree, things are changing. And the exercise is related to personal value. Still, the personality is very much involved with being large. And this is fundamental and not so easy to deter. Many instances, some that I've heard of and recognized, some folks just act out and try to hope and believe that they could do something different, but generally don't because it becomes their right to do whatever they do because they're somehow of value. That seems to be kind of the norm. Unfortunately, that keeps the intensity operating through us at a level that relates to the personality's view of what is valuable. That is not letting go. That is not surrendering anything. But that is awareness if you can perceive that energy. So that's kind of like a kindergarten step. But nonetheless, a step. It was always hoped that you could engage with higher states, and still is hoped by many. You can engage with higher states, be in this world, and be helpful to others, while not letting anybody know that you are engaged with those states and you are helping others. But it's irrelevant that the you that you are is valuable. It is, of course, but it's not personalized as such. It's not labeled as such. And if it is like that, chances are most of those folks who are on that level, and there are some for sure, they really don't have any interest in becoming recognized, so they can act out in a way that makes them virtually invisible to people. Because people have a view about what is the right way to be, and this is spiritual and that's not spiritual. Folks don't really have any idea what's going on in the being of another. But they do have opinions about what that may be. And this, of course, increases the personalization of an individual and how important they are because they have an opinion. This is the nature of how we are here. So surrendering that as a value seems very difficult for us here on these planes. And in certain ways of thinking. So I hope that's a bit of an answer. I will say, of course, can you talk about the meaning of surrender in religious systems, its role in spiritual development, and how it might relate to experiencing a movement of energy? If you are noted sincere as being sincere and open to engaging with the higher state and not using it for a purpose of being extra special in your own personal eyes, whatever that may be, it's not the same as speaking it out. It's the same as it is as you are inside. And that is known because that higher state would operate through you to give you life. So it's not anything you do, it's not a secret from that state. But it's not somebody isn't there to hit you and knock you down because you're a bad boy or girl. That's our stuff. That's the stuff that we were given so that we could be, let's say, at least attempt to be reasonably okay with other people and ourselves. Well, some people were trained differently than that, and others still believe they're like that and aren't. There's a big, big variance in this, and none of that is negative. It's just how it is. But that flow, you can't fool it. You can think you fool other people, but you can't fool it. It's just there. And it utilizes, it helps you to see those things. And if awareness is focused on perceiving and trying to be helpful to yourself, you could say that you would be helpful to yourself because you would be sincere and honest about it. Honesty does not mean talking to other people and telling them all about this or that. Honesty is more like being honest within yourself about how you see, how you are. That's a different thing. The rest of it is still all personality stuff. So there's a rendering there, a letting go inside, a surrendering. Was terminology used in the past, almost like a warlike episode. You battle yourself and you surrender, that kind of thing, because that was the nature of the kind of words that were used and still are by many. Winning and losing, surrendering, attacking their vulnerability, all that kind of stuff. A different kind of rendering. If you can let go and open, that flow will be there. The next step is noticing it. And then the next step is softening down your approach or your interaction with your own life to the best of your ability, whatever that is. And knowing sometimes this is all you can do. Other times, oh, I did better with that. That's interesting. And you're not there trying to beat yourself up, just trying to see and understand and continue best you can. That's kind of, I hope that's okay, Jen. That's kind of what I would say about it. I'm having trouble seeing. I think my glasses are dirty. Yeah. I think I've covered most that I made some notes on. Yeah, the other thing is proofs. I did mention it here in some of my notes I was trying to put down on paper. Sometimes uh, proofs of being able, big word, phrase, uh, is monetary success, success at um memorizing um, all different kinds of things that are of value in religious beliefs or any other beliefs for that matter. There's nothing really spiritual about that. This is what has been uppermost in life in all of our history, from the most savage to the present time. Uh, Makes the personality valuable somehow. Our personalities are always valuable, they're precious, and they are of great value. One very interesting thing, in a nanosecond, you can shift from one way of seeing things to another by an infusion of energy that happens to come in at an appropriate time, in an appropriate context. And it's as if you can see better, you understand you just a little bit better, and you recognize something that maybe might be helpful to you in relating to others in your life as well as yourself. And these things happen to people all the time, but only in moments when you can allow that letting go to begin to happen. Otherwise, we are quite defensive, honestly, about our positions in place, unless you've decided to try and do something slightly different than that, and try and be open and listen and understand that there are many approaches that are fed by that higher state, many approaches, from the highest to the worst, in the hope that always there is an opening that might occur in an individual so that they can begin to understand differently than they ever could before. It's not that they understand everything and now they're bad. No, no. They may not be able to engage in a particular way because of the nature of their training, for example, of the nature of their vulnerability inside of them, or the nature of a willingness to express something within them that might be helpful to them because of a fear that they may be seen in a different light than how they believe they are seen. These are just things that are normal for all of us human beings. And we are truly worthy of engaging with higher states little by little the best we can. I hope that's a little bit helpful, Jen. There's another one here from Barbara Newport in Ottawa. She has two questions. Do we carry over from past lives our methodologies for dealing with life? It's an interesting question. I don't have a perfect answer for that one. I think as we begin to become perhaps more able to experience some of the timelines that we've been involved with, and I said some, that might be helpful to us now. For example, seeing something that you may have done before, and then considering it and seeing that it might be trying to help you, try not to do this time, this kind of thing, because um, the results are uncommonly frustrating or not helpful. Although we may have had a number of lives where that behavior or method of engaging with life was front and center, and it seemed to be okay at the time. What I'm talking about here is not considering that if you were King of France, Louis XIV, for example, uh, and you were engaging with being Louis XIV, but thought everything should just fall into place the way you think it should. And of course it should, everybody knows. And but you looked at it and you said, maybe even though I thought I was being helpful in a way, maybe I wasn't as helpful as I thought I was being. So maybe trying to reconsider where you think help might be given might be helpful for you. I'm grasping at straws here, of course. But I'm trying to come up with an idea that might be, instead of thinking of, oh, I was Louis XIV before, I need to have a crown now. I'm extra special, or whoever, whatever. Our dilemma with our personalities, with reincarnation, is that we tend to want to be something that was extra special so that we can feel more extra special now. I understand this, and I think anybody out there could. But at the same time, if you consider in the long haul as a process through which we grow so that we can begin to be more open and honest with ourselves, even though we think we always are, and see things that we won't allow ourselves to see without calling it negative, but just saying, oh my goodness, look, I didn't even notice that before. Let me try and do that slightly differently. So maybe I can be more open and engage with a different state. Maybe a hard sell, especially if you have a view about your personality currently that is highly valued by you. And most of our personalities are highly valued by the people who wear them and engage with them. This is normal. This is not extra special. This is just the nature of how we are here, 8 billion of us. We grab onto something that's of value. Because it's a vulnerable world. And it makes us feel vulnerable. And we try to construct it somehow, unknowingly most of the time, but sometimes knowingly, so that we can engage with it in a reasonable manner, whatever reasonable is for each and every one of us, and still continue to grow the best we can. These incursions into past life elements show up from time to time. They may be circumstance. It may be how you respond. It may be things that happen inside of you that no one knows. In any event, if you can look at those as if you're just watching to see how you do and how you function, and recognize sometimes you'll function very well, and sometimes you will not. Do what you can when you can and why you think you need to. That will help you to understand you even better. None of us do perfectly with this. I often wondered, with respect to Jen's question, if there is an issue relating to, and some people think this, I guess, in the West, why we have had this view that if we are really, really able, we have a right to utilize that ability to put down other people. That was always a question. And then I began to realize this is not new. This is something that is really basically kind of tribal. You have a little group in your mind, the group of you, all these personality traits, and you utilize them so that you can function in the world according to how you think you need to function. Sometimes you don't even think about them and you're just doing you. Some of that may have been from old times when it was just the only thing reflexively to do. And it's grabbed you. This happens in everybody. But when you're looking at, if you're looking at attempting to be conscious of something, truly conscious, then you attempt to be conscious of you as you are, just today, and not beat you up, not judge you as more important or less important than anybody else. Because if you start becoming aware of you, you start to realize that everyone else, even though they may not be aware of it, they're living in an attempt, in a kind of strange way, to go beyond themselves or to protect themselves and remain where they are. This is a necessary injunction, somehow, that we have within ourselves. And it is very difficult. One, you become extremely defensive. And the other, you can become very aggressive. Another one, you can not care about any of that and don't do anything. Well, that's been done. Others have tried that. And others have believed that and set up a system based on that. There are many systems. And when you're looking at tremendous amount of engagement with past lives, potential past lives, then you have the same kind of thing going on. You look at modalities, you look at methods of living, you sense out and you watch where you're feeling good, and you try to maintain feeling good related to what you believe you need to do to maintain that. And it's consistent. Problem is, we miss the fact that it's not helpful sometimes. And the consistency is there like a barrier to letting yourself be okay within yourself. Because you're determined to maintain something, you can't let go enough to open up to something. This is normal. So I'm not saying very much for the norm, am I? But I did say life is precious. The key in all of that is understanding that existing on these planes has purpose. And that purpose is related directly to, from my perspective, engaging with a higher state and linking the two so that you can live on both planes. And this will take a big jump in what we consider belief systems to be. It will be disturbing if we find out that what we have memorized and idealized may not be quite exactly the same thing. It might be even better. But it doesn't have that inclination to utilize that energy for a purpose that is individualized because we can. The trick is if you can do something and engage that way, you may begin to realize it may not be helpful to others or yourself. And that will be helpful, and that will come up in relationship to past lives. It will also come up in relationship to new understandings. And I think this is really valuable. Not sure I answered your question, Barbara, but it was an interesting way to go about it. You also said, you talked about our personal need to be an individual separate from others. Yeah, I did. Does that make us miss an essential connection in consciousness and purpose with others? And how do we soften this tendency? The avenue that I consider valuable is by learning how to begin to be aware of energy that's already in us. The second step is to find out what we do with it. Perceiving energy itself initially will come in with the intensity that you use already for a purpose that relates to personalization. Now, as soon as I said that, I know full well that sometimes that may not be true. It may come in quite gently when you're pretty intense, because to have it come in really strong would be hurtful to you. This is a level of compassion that is unbelievable. The strange thing about it is, if you're willing to be open to recognizing that, it softens the heart. In other words, it gives you the courage to be willing to be gentler than you think you're allowed to be, and kinder than you would ever want to be. But it puts you in line with, I'm going to connect these two, but perhaps times when you were gentle and you were kind and you were respectful of a level of loving that was phenomenal. And you're bringing some of these lifetimes together here for a purpose that will allow you to recognize that it's okay to be softer, even if it doesn't sit well with your past training. Now, that's interesting, because our training we've had from the time of being in the womb, actually, is very, very strong. And some have been blessed with pretty fundamentally wonderful training. Others, not so much. And some of the work that is done on this plane is kind of bringing things together, like a uniting edges of energy. One can be soft and the other not as soft, but the individual has been able before and soft. But the hope is to bring that harshness closer to the middle ground so that the species can be closer to the middle ground, as opposed to its tendency to be highly charged in a personalized way related to winning and losing. This seems rather far-fetched, depending on what news you're watching and how you look at life. But nonetheless, we're talking about energy here. And we're talking about the ability to begin to become aware of it. And this is very difficult for many to even consider the possibility that it might be of value or that it might even exist. But if it's involved with a religious background, then you can fit it into that religious orientation so that you don't have to do it every day. Or if you are really interested in understanding something deeper and being involved with something deeper, then you have to overcome your engagement with the world, the way the world is telling you you need to do things. Well, it's not so simple. It's like a change in clothes. Every time you move around into a different scenario, you have to change your clothes. And people do this, by the way, in the workplace. And they do this to go out and play sports, or to work on a car, or to engage with something in the garden, or to engage with themselves sometimes. It's learning that these engagements are often reflexive rather than being noticed. Or they can be noticed after a while, or they might be just plainly, you might begin to notice through experience with a large number of people, for example. You might notice, oh, well, this person's like this. That's a little bit like Harry. It's more like Zelda used to be. So that's what they do. Oh, this gives me an idea. Maybe I can do something constructive here. Maybe it might be helpful there because of that experience. And because you may have done something like that previously. You might not have, but you may have. You might have had a propensity to engage in a certain manner. And that propensity may be because of another timeline. But it's not necessarily true that it was. But it could have been. And what the problem is right there is that our awareness of past lives, should they exist for us, is that we do not have very much awareness of them. And those who do are sometimes, because hardly anybody does, but quite a few do. Some of these are just folks who are just considered a little off the mainstream, to be polite. This devaluation is very, very important for us because we want to keep things the way they are in us. In other words, if we don't have it, they don't have it. It's okay. But it is a defensive system. And if you could see that that was true, then it might touch you a little bit, let you pull back from that response so that you might become a little bit more open to the possibility that you may have had a few lives. And you are also in a process of opening beyond your understanding to a deeper depth of what may be real and not only a belief. This may be of some consequence. It's important to see whether it might be, but don't push it. The worst thing that can happen is pushing. Well, I must have been this, and I must have been that, and I must have been this. Because there's no, let's say, there's too much vulnerability in it, and there's too much opinion in it. And it can be hurtful to you because you will judge yourself. Assessment has been the road of our engagement with life. This is what we're taught to do. And apparently, worse now than we've ever had it, because everybody has an opinion and they're all perfectly true. And of course, they're just ideas that reflexively come up faster than you can think most times in protection of how you already believe things are. This is natural in our world as well. So being kind to all of this sort of stuff, yes, we can lose that connection in a kind of way, but we won't lose our life connection. We may lose the opportunity, but we won't lose the energetic connection. It will be there, that love of us, so that we can eventually perceive that which we do, and that's what others do as well, and try to have some empathy for them. However difficult it is for you to grow, remember it's just as difficult for anyone else to grow. Try to pay less attention to the verbalizations about people who have grown in terms of how important they are and all the rest of it. None of us. Let me put it this way, every single one of us grow relative to where we are. Every single one of us grow relative to where we are. Slowly, gently, compassionately, if you can, have it happen. See where you are and be okay with you. I wish everybody well. Thank you very much, Barbara and Jen, for the questions. We're always appreciative of questions, and we always need them. So now I think we'll meditate. I think it's about 10:02, and we'll meditate for roughly about 45 minutes to an hour. And I wish everyone well. Please take care of yourself. Talk to you soon.
Siri Guru Name Sri Sri Guru Krishna, 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 Jai Jai, Hare Rama, 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 Jai Jai. Hare Krishna, 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 Jai Jai. Hare Rama, 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 Jai Jai. Hare Krishna, 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 Jai Jai. Hare Rama, Rama, Krishna, 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 Jai Jai. Krishna, 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 Jai Jai. Krishna, 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 Jai Jai. Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnat Purnam Udacate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Shishyate Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnat Purnam Udacate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Shishyate Om Purnamada Purnamida Purnat Purnam Udacate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Shishyate Purnamada Purnamida Purnat Purnam Udacate Purnasya Purnam Adaya Purnameva Shishyate Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamuda, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnamivama Shishyate, Avashishyate. Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamida, Chati, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnamivama Shishyate, Avashishyate. Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamada, Purnamida, Purnamida, Chati, Purnasya Purnamadaya, Purnamivama Shishyate, Avashishyate, 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. 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 Ramananda Parama Sukada Kevalam Jnana Murti Dvandvatitam gagana sadrisham tatvamasya vilakshya Ekam nityam vimalam achalam sarvadi sakshi bhutam ekam nityam vimalam achalam sarvadi sakshi bhutam Bhavaditam Tribunam Rahitam Satgurum Tam Namami Bhavaditam Tribunam Rahitam Satgurum Tam Namami Brahmanandam Paramasukaram Kevalam Jnanamurti Brahmanandam Paramasukaram Kevalam Jnanamurti Dvandvatitam gagana sadrisham tatvamasya vilakshya अन्वादितं सदृशं तत्त्वमस्य हरिरस्य एकं नित्यं विमलं अचलं सर्वाणि साक्षीभूतम् एकं नित्यं विमलं अचलं सर्वाणि साक्षीभूतम् Satguru Tam Namami Bhavajita Yuna Raita Satguru Tam
Now we'll just begin to do the balancing and grounding on your own. And take care, everybody. Wish you a